Okay, so we need to solve the problem of we've got a box, but there's nothing in the box. There's two ways we can solve that problem. I'm going to show you both of them. The first way is just up here. When we make the box, we can actually put something in the box as soon as we make it. And we do that with a special symbol. I'm going to switch over here so I can write it out. And I want to get a show of, do a little straw poll here. We're going to use this symbol. It is not equals. So in programming, equals has a meaning. This symbol is not the equals symbol. Say again? You're kind of right there, actually. So one way you can read this is as gets. The name of this is not the equals sign. It is the assignment operator. We'll talk about that. Yeah. One equal sign by itself in Java does not mean equals. It means put this thing in this box. It means create this thing and put it in this box if you haven't created it. Well, we'll talk about that. But keep that in mind that one equal sign by itself does not mean, hey, these two things are equivalent. It means take the thing in the right and put it in the thing on the left. So switching back to here, after my joystick, before the semicolon, I can put the equal sign, which is really the assignment operator. And what am I going to put into this box? Well, what can the box hold? So I should probably put a joystick. So it doesn't like that. And that's okay, it's not supposed to like that. Objects in Java and in some other languages have a special method. And that special method lets you create objects. So we said before that the class is the what? The blueprint. Tells you how to make things. The thing you're making is called an object. So how do you use a class to make, come on, there we go. How do you use a class to make an object? Use a special method, a very special method. And that method is called the constructor. The constructor is a method for constructing objects from a class. It all kind of makes sense, especially when you think about Blueprint, right? So there's a special function that is called the constructor, and it's got a really easy way to use it. It is just the name of the class with a set of parentheses. Now, sometimes there will be inputs, sometimes there won't be. So if I switch back, I've got the name of the class, it's joystick. What do I need? Parentheses. Okay, so I've got something there. That's looking better, because it's at least recognizing the word joystick now. But going back to the constructor idea, there's actually one more thing we need. There's another special word with the constructor, because otherwise it just looks like a function. The special word that you have to use with the constructor is the word new. Because I'm not making any old joystick, I'm making a new joystick.
Brand new, shiny.
And so this is starting to look more what we want, but it's still not happy. And let's hover over and see what it says. It says the constructor joystick is undefined. And so what this is telling me is, hey, there is a joystick out there, but it doesn't have a constructor that doesn't take any inputs. And so this joystick constructor does require one input. And if I hover over it, I can see not a whole lot of information, But I do know, and I'll tell you, that it requires a number. And it's going to require the number, in this case, 0. Now, if I hover over joystick, it'll actually tell me, hey, I was actually looking for the port number. Because in FRC, when you do a robot, you can have, I think, up to 6 different joysticks, technically, at a time. You could probably have more, really. But they have to be numbered. Otherwise, it doesn't know which joystick it is. Yep.
Mine just says port dot 0.
Yeah, so mine, yeah, does it look like this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
His screen is right.
yeah, so if you look at this, I can't actually delete that. That port with a colon is a hint from WPI Lab saying, hey, the number that's here is a port number. So I can't delete that port, it's just there. There's a setting you can do to turn it off. We might look at that later, but that's what it's doing here. But I'm going to save that. I'm going to try that simulation one more time. All right, now it's working. So this is what we would expect to see. Now mine is working because I've got this keyboard in joystick 0 position. Yours may or may not be doing that, but that's the idea there. If I switch between the modes, it's still happy, no problems there. And if you look in your terminal output, you get a whole bunch of zeros because it was reading 0 from my keyboard. So we'll get rid of that. But it's no fun working with keyboards, so we're going to hook up some controllers. All right, so we're going to minimize the program for a minute, and we're going to open Driver Station.
Why does it say it's an Xbox controller?
What says it's an Xbox controller?
This gives me an option.
Well, we'll take a look at it in a minute and see. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to open Driver Station, and I like using Driver Station for this because it demonstrates a whole lot of things before I plug it in. Driver Station's booting up. There's Driver Station. I'm going to jump it out so that we can see this a little more clearly. Okay. So in Driver Station, one of the tabs has the USB symbol. We're going to click on that one. This is where your joysticks show up. Now, when we created the joystick, it required a port number. That port number has nothing to do with where you plug the joystick in on the computer. It has nothing to do with which port it's physically plugged into. If you plug, go ahead.
Mine is going on shuffleboard.
That's okay. We don't care about shuffleboard. We just care about the Driver Station. I'm going to just plug this into one of my USB ports, and it immediately pops up in Driver Station, and it's in number 0. And it's correctly identifying it as a GamePad F310. Now I can actually drag this around and put it into a different position. There it is in 2. There it is in 4. There it is in 2 again. There it is in 1 again. And there it is in 0. It does not matter which port you put it in, except that it does matter which port you put it in. Right? It doesn't matter that it's in port 0. It matters that you know that it's in port 0. It doesn't matter if it's in port 5. What matters is you know it's in port 5. Now, if I unplug it, it actually sticks around. Driver Station remembers, hey, there was a joystick plugged in here. And that can become a problem because if you swap out a bunch of joysticks and you're trying different things out, then your list will fill up. But it can only hold 6 things in the list. So to get rid of it, you just double click on it and it goes away when you're not plugged in. And then if you come back in later, plug it in, it recognizes it again. So if I drag it down to the 3rd position, oops, doesn't like that. Rescan, unplug. There it is in 0, plug it back in. It's in 0, I can drag it down to 5. Unplug it. It remembers, hey, you plugged in you plugged in an F310 into port 5. I plug it back in. And if I unplug it, if I plug it into this USB port I've got on the other side of my computer, it's going to recognize it as the same one. So again, physical ports don't matter. I will plug it in over here because it's a little bit easier to work with. So what does matter here? There's a whole bunch of useful stuff here. If you look in the little area over here when you've got it selected, you can see all the axes and all the buttons and the POV, and even rumble if you've got rumble enabled. But as you press buttons, you can see the buttons light up. You can figure out which buttons are which. So let's see, there's the A button, the B button, X, Y, L1, L2, now L1, R1, L2 and L2 are not buttons. So then we've got select and start, and then pressing the left stick and pressing the right stick. But then we've also got all these triggers and all these axes. And then the D-pad is this POV. And we're going to talk about all these and what they are. But this is a good tool you have for figuring out what is what on here. Any questions on that?
A good way to find stick drift.
Say again?
Also a good way to find stick drift.
Also a good way to find stick drift. Yeah, if you hover over the axes, it'll actually show you the numbers, which is super helpful sometimes. All right, so let's see. Let's start with. We say you start with buttons. You want to start with buttons or axes?
Axes.
Let's start with buttons. Let's start with buttons. We'll do them all, but we're going to start with buttons. Oh, actually, we got one more thing we want to do. So I told you there were two ways to do this. I'm going to undo this. So now I'm back to the bad code, right? Where we know it's going to crash, and what's the error going to be? Say again? Has a joystick size hole in it, and what was the name of that error? A null pointer exception, right. So I could create the joystick there, but sometimes I can't do that. Sometimes you need to do additional configuration before you can make the thing. If that happens, you can go into the robot init method. Why is that a good place to do it? When does that run? It's the very first thing that happens when the robot turns on. And how many times does robot init happen? One time when the robot's turned on. So because of that, that's a good place to configure stuff because it's only going to happen one time and it's going to happen as soon as you start. So here's another way to put something in the box. So up here, when we declared the variable, right, saying we need a variable is declaring a variable, and then putting something in the variable is assigning it, you can split declaration and assignment. So in line 17, we are declaring the variable. In line 26, we're going to assign it. Now, if you declare and assign separately, you don't need to redo everything you've done. So I don't need to say joystick, my joystick. Why not? Why don't I need to say that my joystick is a joystick? We already know. We already made the box. So it's just going to be my joystick. And how do we say put something in the box? We use the equal sign, which is the assignment operator. And what are we going to put in the box? A new joystick, parentheses 0, semicolon to finish the thought. So this is equivalent, more or less, to the other code we just ran. Again, sometimes you don't have to do this, sometimes you do have to do this. So I'm just showing you that there are two ways to do this. How you can declare and assign in one line, or you can declare in the class and then assign in robot init.